WLRN Video presents.
I interviewed Alix Aharon, who runs the gender mapping project at GenderMapper.org. We spoke about the project, gender clinics, transgenderism, and pornography. Alix works tirelessly to expose the exploitation and corruption in the gender and pornography industries. Enjoy Alix's passionate dive into these topics. This is Emiliann with WLRN, and I'm here with Alix Aharon of the Gender Mapping Project. So I'm glad that you're able to join me today.
Yeah, I'm very glad as well. And it's really great to be able to speak to you. I'm such a huge fan of WLRN. Awesome.
So right now you're actually in California, but you're from Israel?
Yeah, that's right. So, I run the Gender Mapping Project, which is a global project into investigating the medical industry, and which is actually behind this massive trend that we're seeing over the last couple of years of these girls getting the double mastectomies, going on hormones, the young women that are turning up at Planned Parenthood with informed consent and leaving a few seconds later with dangerous cross-sex hormones. So that's my project. I'm interested in gender clinics if they're in Iceland, if they're in Iran, if they're in California. Then I think that I have a lot of work to do and lots of exciting volunteers to coordinate with.
So how did you get involved with exposing gender clinics?
I think it was actually something that just came to me. Obviously I've just always thought this is completely horrific. I came from a background of sex industry abolition, trying to pass the Nordic model, some kind of exposing of the surrogacy industry, both locally and also the export of it. So a lot of Israelis will actually go to places like Colombia, and previously, before they closed the market, they would also go, predominantly gay men actually, would previously go to India and Nepal. But now that market has closed. So I report on things like that. Very much interested in women's rights, incredibly passionate about it. But this issue has completely enveloped me. And when I say that, I mean, because what I want to do is I just want to expose. I just want to tell people, like, this is what's going on. We're not crazy. Because I wandered into a Planned Parenthood a week and a half ago, and I have the literature about how you can get on cross-sex hormones, right? So this is not some kind of, crazy myth that's been going around for the past couple of years. And a lot of the time we're gaslit and we're told that never happens. You're talking nonsense. Sometimes when I say to people, there are doctors who will perform breast removal surgery on a 14-year-old, they tell me I'm lying. And I'm like, I'm not lying. And I'm going to show you how I know I'm not lying, because I've called the clinics, I've recorded the conversations, I've booked the appointments, and here is the evidence, right? So that's what I wanted to bring to this, is just some solid evidence-based data, and to say, you guys can do what you like with it. If you think that gender surgery for minors is amazing, then they can use my map to find a surgeon, right? But nobody thinks it's okay. I mean, only the most indoctrinated, evil person thinks that this kind of thing is okay. But the data is out there and people can do with it what they want. But so far, people have been really inspired by the data. They've gone and they've actually protested outside of clinics whilst using the gender map, of course. Many people have cited the map in books and in articles. I was really excited that Janice Raymond actually cited my work in her latest book. That was a great moment for me. But many people have, been using the map, and it's been shared very, very widely, which is wonderful.
That's great. And before we get deeper into the conversation, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show the viewers the map. So you go to gendermapper.org. Can you see my screen? Okay. And you go to the gender map. And it says that it's always 20 days behind to preserve your secrecy.
Yes, I mean, right now, we have an updated version of the map, which we're working on internally, myself and the volunteers. And the version which is on the website is always a little bit behind. So we actually have a new version to release, which was going to have a lot more information in Canada. And we also have a lot more information, which is going to be released in Australia. And I can tell you that is, hundreds more clinics that we've managed to locate there. Well, the volunteers have managed to locate there, which is horrible, but it's also great because the more sunlight we can put on this situation, the more disinfectant we can bring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's the map right here, and then you click on it.
You just kind of try to open it up in a new tab. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So you can see here, if you want, you can just go and see. Yeah, great.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
awesome.
North
So
America is the most shocking one on the map right now.
Yeah, but if you take a look at the purples are the child gender clinics. Which actually, to be honest, most of these do need to be changed to purple because Planned Parenthood is now giving hormones to 16-year-olds, 16 and 17-year-olds. So that's very, very shocking. But the purple ones that you see, which are the pediatric gender clinics, what they do is they actually will put a child on puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, under the age of 18. And the orange ones that you see are pediatric surgeons. So what they will do is they will actually remove the breasts of a 14-year-old girl, 15-year-old girl, 12-year-old girl. With, of course, they all have different requirements for what they consider to be, safe health or informed consent or the Gillett competence or whatever. But it's all kind of smoke and mirrors because these are surgeons who are the least ethical. Just this week, I managed to see a picture, which has been shared quite widely, of a surgeon in Florida that performed a double mastectomy on a young woman, a young girl. Rumor has it that she's a teenager, and she is covered. All of her arms, both arms, all of her stomach is covered in self-harm scars.
Yeah.
And have you seen that picture? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So that person is called Dr. Gallagher, and she is based out of Miami, like a very horrific person. And I say that with some confidence after watching a lot of her TikToks. And did you know that Jazz Jennings is actually volunteering in her surgery? Did you know about that? Yeah,
Emiliann has been documenting that program.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's horrendous. Honestly, it's at the same time as you watch Jazz, you're excited to be watching it because they've edited it very, very cleverly, and they want it to be entertaining. But on the other hand, you're disgusted, and you're trying not to like cry or be sick. It's the most disgusting show on TV. I mean, it's on TLC, and we're watching the systematic destruction of a teenage boy, now I guess a young man. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I don't know how that show has flown under the radar. I mean,
Well, I mean, I think honestly, that they started to normalize Jazz's body issues from the age of about 8. From the age of 8, he was going to the doctor, and we were coming with him because we were there because they had cameras and they documented the whole thing. And they had a one-on-one with a doctor that sat down with young Jazz Jennings, and measured his testicles and then told the viewers how, I guess, far along into puberty he was. It was so disturbing and so dark, and nobody was saying, wait, isn't this pedophilia? How is it not? Right?
Yeah, that show is completely voyeuristic. I mean, I don't know how you can't watch that and realize that there's child abuse going on.
Well, I think they're trying to normalize it. I really do.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you've been doing Only Enemies with Joey Bright.
That's right.
And that has, so far, it's had a really hard emphasis on the link between gender ideology and pornography. So when did you start noticing that link?
Well, I think the link between pornography and intense dissatisfaction in your body has always been there. I mean, no one has ever said, I don't think anyone's ever really made the argument that that porn is representative of sex, and that porn is great for you. I mean, even now there's a lot more discussion about, okay, I'm not so sure about gonzo porn. I think some of it, there's a lot more talk, especially like Billie Eilish coming out and saying how much porn has affected her. And these are kids that have been living online, completely online, they've been raised on social media, and they've been raised with the normalization of rape and the normalization of sexual abuse from a very, very young age, through Instagram and through Facebook and through all of it, even through TikTok, right? TikTok is also incredibly sexy. So they've been normalized into that. And the average age of a kid starting to get hooked on pornography is 8 years old for a boy and 12 years old for a girl. So, and these girls are wanting to do things that are intensely linked to self-hatred and body dysmorphia, as we would have called it back then. And just knowing that you are going to school every day with young men who are addicted to porn, and to say, you know what, I'm not sure that I like that. I'm not sure that I want him to look at my breasts. I'm not sure that I want to sleep with him. I'm not sure if this is for me. Or maybe a lot of these girls previously, about 5 years ago, the trend was that the girls were realizing that they were interested in girls, and that was giving the gender dysphoria. But now, the trend very much is heterosexual young girls, so heterosexual teenagers that are expressing some kind of dissatisfaction in their bodies, and they're going on to identify as gay men. And then once they come out of it, they're saying, Alix, I was totally addicted to hentai pornography, and specifically boy on boy hentai pornography. Hentai is the cartoon anime stuff that's done, incredibly graphic, incredibly violent, incredibly connected to pedophilia, incredibly connected to transgenderism. And we also have some kind of trans species element to it as well, because often in this dangerous, demented pornography, the person is having, intercourse or whatever it is with an animal, right? Because it's all drawn. It's so completely twisted. And there's so many of these young people who are saying that they're addicted to hentai, or that they've been influenced by hentai, that are going on to express trans identity. So that's the way that I see the link is. It's all kind of connected in this new internet age where we have a lot more information, but then a lot more mental illness.
So then the connection would be that, especially for girls, they see this abusive pornography and they want to identify out of womanhood.
I would say that's definitely a large component, but also I also think that the first time a young girl logs on to Pornhub and sees gonzo porn and sees the violence and sees the degradation, I think that it's actually almost like a type of trauma that happens in her and that she comes back again and again to experience that. And the reason I say that is not because it's my theory. It's actually a theory that Gail Dines spoke about, who I have a lot of respect for, really great researcher into pornography. And it's almost like you always hear about people that go back continually to their abusive situation because they want to feel that type of security or repetition or comfort. And I think a lot of these girls are going back to the pornography in order to feel that. And then they're experiencing, as a result, so, a lot of body incongruence, a lot of issues, a lot of anxiety. And I don't think that most people, most women know, I don't think that most women over the age of 30 know necessarily how violent and how degrading pornography really is, especially the gonzo porn, which is the only type of porn that the men are watching.
In gonzo porn, that's like the first person point of view.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the, I mean, okay, so let's imagine that everything that's not gonzo would be considered like, I don't know, like artsy kind of stuff. You wouldn't have the rough kind of just beating, hatred, spitting, all of it. You don't get that in the other type. And I'm not defending it, but it's almost non-existent, to be honest. Everybody is onto the gonzo. And it's just the more crazy, the hotter the whole thing is for the viewer, right? That's the way it's depicted. The more racist and the more, I guess, disgusting, the more views it's going to get, and the more it's going to, because you're shocking somebody at the same time as you're exciting them, I guess. And it's just, it's like a ceiling, I suppose, if you want to think about it like drugs. You're increasing the dosage, and that's what's happening.
Right. And I was curious the other day, and I went to Pornhub and I went to their what's most popular right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all mostly like faux incest, like stepdad, stepdaughter.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I found that just disgusting.
So
like, this is what men are watching.
Yeah, so it's not just men, though. I think that's something that I often have made the mistake of doing, of saying this is what the men are watching. No, this is what the boys are watching. This is what, the future policemen are watching. This is what the teachers of 2030, 2040 are watching, right? This is so important for us to try and crack down on this and within our own social circle. And also to tell mothers, listen, your 13-year-old, your 14-year-old girl is watching this. And if you think that she's not, you're living in a fantasy. Come on. So I always try to say to people, like, porn is not just your dad that's watching it, or your brother, or your colleague at work. It's honestly, it's so widespread and people just have no clue about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm 31. So I remember my first exposure was finding a Playboy in like the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And then by the time I was a teenager and there was the internet, it was mainly like the porn sites that you had to verify on, or you had to pay for. So you would get like the 30-second clips, like the previews. Or you could download it illegally off of like LimeWire or something like that.
Right.
And then by the time I was an older adult, early 20s, then it was more like Pornhub-esque type websites. And it was becoming more widespread. And a lot of it was like the shock factor, like the 2 girls, 1 cup. And stuff.
Yeah.
I would watch that with my friends because it was like watching a horror movie, right? It's just like, it's embarrassing and it's scary and it's, I don't know, but now it's just gotten worse, I guess, because you can access it. You don't have to sit down at a desktop and type.
Exactly. And that's the problem, really, is that if you are, if you were a 12-year-old before, you would have had limited access. You would have had to go to find the magazine, get an adult to buy it for you. And even then, you were not shown the type of content. But with 2 or 3 clicks of this, the cell phone, which every kid has, they can get onto Pornhub and have constant, direct, and uninterrupted graphic content, which is really, I think it's really messing up their lives. I mean, I can't even say that I think that it is messing up the lives of children and teenagers.
So you're saying that these girls, they want to identify as men because they've been traumatized. So then they watch male on male porn because they're actually straight. So how does that all, I don't know.
So okay, so I mean, I've never been gender dysphoric. I mean, I've never had a trans identity. I guess maybe I'm just not cool enough or whatever. But I have spoken to many girls who have come out the other side, and so I can just only relay to you what they've told me, and that could be anecdotal. But it's because there's not been any studies done about this, have there? But many of the girls told me that, of course, they were troubled, mental health issues. Many were overachievers, and they watched a lot of hentai and like the anime cartoons with the 2 kind of boys kissing, and read a lot of the comics that are online and things like that. And they started to really idealize those types of relationships. And one of the girls told me, actually 2 girls have told me, that they discovered their trans identity, or they declared it soon after seeing the movie with Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer, Call Me by Your Name, which, you know, it's a gay love story, and it's actually nothing to do with teenage girls. I mean, you could not get a story which is further away from teenage girls. I mean, these are 2 men that are involved in this love story, and it's a great film. But these girls would be watching it, kind of almost like the way that I would have watched the Titanic, and I would have said, "Oh, Kate and Leo have got such a lovely relationship, and how fun that would be." Idealizing like a 12-year-old does. Going, wow, fantastic, and I want to be on a boat and all of that. But they're doing that. But they're coming to the conclusion that, no, actually, I can be Timothée Chalamet, or I can be in that type of situation. And because they're heterosexual, they want to be with guys. So they're coming to this wild conclusion that they're actually gay men. And one of the ones that comes to mind, well, now this isn't totally identical, like it's not the same trajectory, but I think about that New York magazine cover from a couple of days ago. Did you manage to see it?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think about it?
Well, I saw that post with the side-by-side of the rich trans woman, and then the one that just came out, and the one that just came out is like this naked, it's still a woman, she's naked with a penis, and then the trans woman is fully clothed and celebrated as being powerful. And I found it disturbing because even just looking at that woman's body, like you can tell, like that's a woman, Well,
let me tell you a little bit about her, because I think that she is so symbolic of this situation with women. So she was a journalist for the last, 20 years. I think she's about 40. She's at least like 35. I think she's probably much older. But anyway, so she was a journalist. She was based in Haiti, and she happened to witness a violent rape. And after that, according to her narrative, she developed PTSD. And because of that, she then she writes this incredibly distressing article or series of articles where she describes asking her friend, male friend, to graphically, violently rape her. so that she can recover from this. She obviously sees some insane therapist. You know, she said, I have trauma after witnessing whatever she witnessed. I mean, she wasn't raped. It was her. I think she witnessed some violence against women. And so she writes, she tells this horrible story about how she wanted her, she got her male friend to violently rape her, beat her, the whole 9 yards, right? And this is written about and celebrated, you know, on the internet. If you Google her name, that you'll come up with these articles. And then a couple of years ago, she demands that she wants to be a man. And she describes in the most gut-wrenching, graphic detail the surgeries that she has undergone, how she wants to have her uterus removed and incinerated, right? This is not a story of triumph. This is a story of deep, deep sadness and pain. And the fact that it is on the cover of New York Magazine is a very chilling indication of the situation that we're in right now with young women. And it did bring me quite a lot of excitement to see a lot of the comments that were actually on that post. I went into Twitter and I saw every single one of them was like, this is horrendous. New York Magazine, you are disgusting. I can't believe what I'm seeing. It was just person after person after person. And I'm not talking about radical feminists, talking about, you know, just average people who are not involved in this at all, seeing it for the first time and saying, hang on a minute, this is awful. This is so twisted and dark. And it's I mean, really, a woman saying, I wanted a penis so badly that I was willing to die for it. She says that she bought a burial plot. She writes it in the magazine, that she bought a burial plot because she was prepared to die to get her penis. Or what kind of a world is this that we're living in, where we're indulging this type of mental illness? This woman needs serious therapy. Like, it's not like I'm saying that to be cruel to her. Anybody can see it because it's written in plain English in great detail in the magazine. And I wonder how it's got to this. I really do.
Yeah, it's like celebrated, you know. And the whole, do you want a live son or a dead daughter? You know, like that narrative has become so normalized.
Yeah, and it's such a load of nonsense as well, because suicide after transition is just as hard. And of course it is, because you're not fixing anything. You're not fixing a thing. Can you imagine if I said to you, if somebody had, you know, crippling anxiety and they told you, it's my breasts, it's absolutely my breasts, it's my breasts, and if I just have a boob reduction, my whole life will be fixed. It's so completely nuts to imagine that would actually happen, right? It's just, like, what does she think this penis is going to do for her? It's a piece of skin which is attached to her, which doesn't belong there, which her body is actively, every second of the day for the rest of her life, her body is working to get that off because it's not supposed to be there. And, you know, I've seen surgeries that you cannot pee. Even the metoidioplasty, which is a lot less awful than the phalloplasty. Even in the metoidioplasty, we're talking about a surgery which takes 2 implants and stuffs it in the body of a woman so she can kind of feel like she has testicles. And they'll take $200,000 for this, right? These are not average surgeries. This is not a nose job. This is not Botox. It's not getting your ears pierced, right? These are very graphic, horrible, and experimental surgeries that are happening. And they're happening a lot more frequently, actually. They're on the rise. Of course they are, because the map shows that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of profit to be made. And since there's not any standards of care, you know, they're just getting away with it. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that, because the standards of care, even in the Planned Parenthood, are not being, you know, they're actually not being adhered to whatsoever, because I've had a look at WPATH and what it is that they expect. And Planned Parenthood will have you not undergo any of the therapy. They don't need therapy. They don't need a letter. It's 100% informed consent basis, even for the 16 and 17-year-olds, right? So they're not even keeping to the WPATH standards of care, because WPATH does recommend therapy. Of course they do. For some patients, obviously.
You are listening to WLRN.
And just backtracking a little bit, when you
Sure.
brought up that these teenage girls are watching like male love stories, you know,
Yeah.
and they're romanticizing them, it's almost like I could see them thinking that these two males are equals.
Mm-hmm.
And because with the male and female relationship, there can be a hierarchy, and especially if you're watching traumatic porn, that's even more solidified for you. So it seems like they want equal footing with their partner. And like, if I'm a man, then they'll treat me better.
Yeah. I think, listen, I wish that I could crack open the heads of some of these young women who are going through this, or young girls. But I only speak to the ones that come out of it, that come and speak to me after and say, I've had a lot of time to reflect upon this. Yes, I idealized, gay relationships, like in this very childlike way, because they didn't idealize, I don't know, their cousin who's married to a man. They idealize like these movies where you have no connection to the character. So the whole thing is very much framed in a very childlike manner and through the lens of a teenage girl. So it's all, I think that once these young, because I feel that the information is getting out there quite slowly, but it's getting out there about the detransitioners who are same-sex attracted, right? Because they explain, internalized homophobia, people understand that. But then when you come on to these heterosexual young girls who are identifying as gay men, there's a lot less that's actually known about it. But one theory which is put out there, which has actually been spoken about by a number of detransitioners, is the autoandrophilia. Do you know anything about autoandrophilia?
It's like autogynephilia.
Yeah, but reversed. Yeah. So it's people think there's first of all, there's almost nothing out there about it, but I do know that if anybody knows the detransitioner Willow, she has spoken quite a lot about her autoandrophilia, and that she wanted to experience. Well, I won't say her specifically because I'll just I don't want to put words in her mouth, and people can watch her videos and hear her speak about her autoandrophilia. But often what the girl will say is that she experiences a type of desire to feel like a man as he is being loved by a man. Does that make sense? So there's the same like there's the same erotic target location error that the autogynephilic males feel, but it's autoandrophilia. So they want to be the man that they want to be with, right? I mean, I guess I hope that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's one theory which, because this area of research has been so stifled by these trans activists who wrote The Man Who Would Be Queen, can't take a walk and couldn't take a walk for years outside of his house because demented trans activists were sending him, they put pictures of his kids online with their eyes blacked out. Right? I mean, that's what happens to you if you want to write about autogynephilia. So no wonder nobody's writing about autoandrophilia. It's just too risky.
Yeah, because it seems like they're trying to make being trans identified equal to being homosexual. Because if somebody were to write about homosexuality as a paraphilia these days, it would be really frowned upon.
Right.
Though that literature does still exist. I found it in my college library. But yeah, so what do you have to say about that? Is transness the same as being gay?
Absolutely not. I mean, absolutely not, because being gay or homosexuality is something that you are, and trans, if you want to think about it, is something which you do. And a gay person, a gay man or a lesbian does not need anybody else in the entire world to acknowledge that they are a lesbian in order to be a lesbian, right? They don't need the participation of anybody else in the world. But a trans person, they are not trans unless everybody else thinks they're trans. You know what I mean? So in order to be trans, you need to have the validation of other people. So it's totally not the same in any way. And I'm not one of these people that believes in biomarkers and stuff like that. But if anybody does want to read that kind of science, the science is there. I don't think the science supports the idea about biomarkers and finger digit length. But if people want to read, Dick Swab's, his name is actually Dick Swab, the guy that did all of the he did homosexual male research, where he kind of argued that homosexuality is completely innate and inescapable, and it has something to do with the length of your finger and how many brothers your mother has. I mean, I think it's crazy, but it's out there for you to read. But no one's ever made this claim that trans is biological or innate or at birth or whatever. And I don't really know how anybody could make that kind of assessment, because how is it possible? How can one, how can one kind of say with any confidence, yeah, I'm totally born in the wrong body? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's the narrative that they're trying to push, because at the recent abortion rally that went on in Washington, D.C., one of their chants was, trans rights begins at conception. You're not like,
oh my God. Trans rights begins at conception. So you're saying that you can have a transgender fetus. That's quite, wow. That's quite the claim. I mean, there's just nothing in it that's scientific whatsoever. Nothing. Of course there's not. And even if somebody was to argue, and I don't feel that this argument is supported, that autoandrophilia, for example, is innate, then you would still have to try and find, okay, what is innate about it? Is it a gene? Is it some kind of a, I've heard a couple of autogynephilic males say that they had a hormone wash at birth. I'm serious. Yeah. Have you heard this nonsense? Yeah. India Willoughby, he says that when he was born, there was a hormone wash that went over him. So he says, I have a girl brain, but a boy body. What part of the brain is a girl? Are you saying that your brain is pink? Are you saying that your brain has more gray matter? Are you saying that your gray gets a period, your brain gets a period? Like, how is the brain female? I just don't get it. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, and they qualify femaleness with pink and what's stereotypically female. And that's how these girls get stuck in this rabbit hole of gender, because they recognize, I don't like that stuff, so I must be a guy or I must be non-binary.
There's also this massive narcissistic element to it, because it was actually Dr. Amitai that turned me on to this. He said that he feels that a lot of these young people actually have borderline personality disorder, and it's a kind of the trans identity. Often it's a way of expressing that, or it's a kind of the beginning phases of it. And I don't think that it could be shown any more clearly than in somebody like Demi Lovato, who just, this is a big attention thing for her to say that she's non-binary and to get this kind of attention. And it's quite clear to me that that's what's going on, of course, with the additional mental illnesses and everything else that's happening with her. But I mean, what part of Demi Lovato was non-binary? Her hair, because she's cut it short? I mean, give me a break. It's so stupid.
Mhm. Yeah, there is a narcissistic element. I think especially with the pronouns and wanting to use they. I mean, it's just counterintuitive for English speakers to call anybody who's singular they, and then they make a big deal. Like I know one person who recently posted on Facebook, oh, they asked for my pronouns at my new job. I'm crying.
Why? Because
They them.
no, man.
Because it's the validation. And I don't know. I just can't imagine. It's like you're watching people's reactions all the time, or you're waiting for somebody to slip up,
Yeah, and it's really authoritarian as well, because nearly all of the people that I know, I mean, I'm 35 years old, so you would think that people my age would be a bit more over this nonsense, but they're not. I have friends that identified 15 years ago, 15 years ago as lesbians. Then they were lesbians for about 5 years. Then they were queer, because queer became the identity to be, and now they're non-binary. But the whole time they're still lesbians, or just in relationships with women, in long-term relationships with women, but they've changed their hair and now they go by they them pronouns. And they're insufferable. I mean, really insufferable. And these are people that I really liked. And I got an email actually from someone that said that they are changing their name for the third time. This is the third email I've got from that person. I just wrote back and I said, just don't send me anything ever again. I don't want to hear about it, because it's one of those chain emails. Hi, everybody. I just want to let you know that I will now be known from this and my pronouns. Just leave me alone. Honestly, leave me alone. You could not have picked a worse person to send this to.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Oh, I'm writing back.
Yeah. So you're in California right now, and a lot of people say that the gender identity stuff really started in California, in the Bay Area, San Francisco. So what have you noticed since being in the epicenter?
I mean, okay, so honestly, I feel that what we have to do in order to combat this is to start seeing things in a localized way. So there has to be somebody who's going to be the activist that will go to their local clinics and scout it out and see what's going on. But being in California has allowed me to actually see a little bit how different Planned Parenthoods might operate from other ones. Just for example, if you're in San Francisco, you have 3 places quite relatively close to each other where you can get non-binary surgeries for minors, right? So it's like, come on, this is a really disturbing trend that's occurring here, and there's many people that believe it completely originated in San Francisco. They're certainly the pioneers of a lot of these surgeries. I mean, Moser is here. That's the gender confirmation center is here. Align Medical is here as well. Align Surgical is here as well. There's just so many people that are, I guess, they're trying to be disruptors in the gender industry space. So they're moving on from trans man and trans women, and they're going on to the gender non-binary and the gender queer. And even this one actually says that they will give you hormones if you're gender non-conforming. So you just need to be gender non-conforming in order to come and receive, actually, you don't need to be gender non-conforming. You can turn up looking like me and say you want to get on testosterone, and you'll get it. You might not get it on the spot. You might have to go through the appointments. But how are they going to tell me that I'm not trans? I say I'm trans. I'm trans. That's it.
There's no standard for what transness is.
And even then, I mean, there's all of these other questions. It's that, okay, so I go in, let's say if I was to go in and I was to say, hey, I feel non-binary, and I want the standard of care. I want to go and experience the full non-binary experience. So, what are they going to give me? Who knows? It's incredibly strange. And when you go in to get the hormone therapy, they don't say this is informed consent FTM. They say it's masculinizing hormone therapy. So it's not going from female to male or female to non-binary. It's just making you a bit more masculine, right? And then they say the benefits, right? What are the benefits? They say your voice will become deeper. How is that a benefit? They say you may grow a mustache and beard. Again, how is that a benefit? Your clitoris will get bigger is under benefits. How is that a benefit? Then they say, what are the risks? They say that you will get more fat in your blood and there's a rare chance of liver failure. And they don't know what will happen. They write that here. They don't know what will happen if you smoke, if you're fat, or if you have a family history of heart disease. This is such nonsense. You can just totally rip this up and put it in the bin. And also, how on earth can a 16-year-old understand what it means? Under can I get pregnant? This is the real kicker here. It says, no one can tell you for sure if taking testosterone will affect your ability to get pregnant. You could get pregnant, or you may never be able to get pregnant in the future, even if you stop the testosterone. If you have sex with a person who makes sperm, you need to use birth control in order to prevent pregnancy. What on earth does that even mean? I mean, so they're saying, we don't know, but maybe, but if you have sex with a person who makes sperm, what is this nonsense? And also, no child, no parents. This is where they have the bit for the parent on page 3. And what they say is, person who's signing and relationship to patient, self, parent, legal guardian, or other. Okay. Now, how on earth can a parent make informed consent decisions about potentially eradicating the fertility of a young woman? They just can't. It's not possible. And I don't know how. I don't know how the big wigs at Planned Parenthood sleep well at night if they know that this is what's going on. Because your average person who works in Planned Parenthood has no clue about the depths of this, because they're just people that are there doing their jobs. They see patients, they try to give them a good level of assistance. I don't think that people that work in Planned Parenthood are evil. I just think that they're totally caught up in this vicious, disgusting cult.
Yeah, they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, most of them. Of course, there's definitely some activists. There's definitely some activists that want to push it, but your average person that works in Planned Parenthood, they're just good people, and they don't know really like what this is doing.
Yeah, and this kind of brings up the topic of eugenics as well, because a lot of these women, well, not women, but girls and boys too, you're going to Planned Parenthood or wherever to get these surgeries and these hormones. You know, a lot of them are mentally ill or even autistic. And it's basically just mass sterilization.
Yeah, but and also Planned Parenthood have there's been a lot of accusations and Planned Parenthood has a very murky history, especially with Margaret Sanger and everything that she was into. I mean, she did say some very distressing things about undesirables, as she did define them. It's in the history. I mean, so that's the kind of the roots of it. So you would think that with that history, they would not want to repeat a mass sterilization program. And especially as I see that they're disproportionately targeting so many people of color. And I even know this from, first of all, everybody can go to GenderMapper.org, put in Planned Parenthood and take and have a look at some of the information that I wrote about the messaging, which is directly being targeted to Black youth who are not interested in transitioning. So if you look at the breakdown, the racial breakdown of all of the trans-identified youth, vast majority are white, vast majority. There's a proportionate representation of Hispanics, or sorry, Latinos, and there's 2% and less than 2% who are Black. So this is unbelievable, because there should be 20%, far more than that. So for the amount of disproportionate advertising and social programs which are aimed at Black trans-identified youth, you would think they actually had some, but it's just not there. So they're not interested, and that makes me question it a whole lot more, because there's so much targeting. Like, come here, are you a person of color who is trans? This free social program, this free counseling. There are a lot of direct messaging to invite more people in, to convert more people, actually.
Yeah, and that's one of the big mantras that you hear is Black trans lives matter.
Yeah. Which really, actually, which does not do anybody any favors, and I'll tell you why. So Black trans lives matter is really one of the worst misrepresentations of the truth that I've ever seen. There was a list of these males who that I think it was Elizabeth Warren. She was trying, I suppose, just to kind of raise awareness or pander or whatever. And she said the names of all of these men who had been murdered. But upon investigation, many of them had died from natural causes or domestic violence. So they'd fought with a male partner at home, right? And it wasn't transphobia. It was gang violence, domestic violence, often natural causes. One of them had actually passed away at home from a heart attack. That's not a Black trans murder, right? And the issue is that what does that say to women? That you don't get a parade. You don't get somebody reading your name out, because we have these more special men who are identifying as women, and we need to honor that. And you almost cannot mention the fact that the average age for a woman to die in prostitution is 37. The average age of a woman to die in pornography is also 37, right? Because every time you start to talk about that and unravel it, you get to, right, but there's also other women who are actually men who are also being killed. But it's like, no, this is a very specific, localized problem. Yes, of course, it's tragic when somebody passes away in Brazil because they have a violent pimp or a violent John. It's awful, and it should never happen. But it does not tell the story of what's going on here, because those guys in Brazil, they are prostituted male cross-dressers. It's totally not the same thing as Richard Levine. I mean, come on. Like, I absolutely hate this narrative, and it's so damaging. And it's such an insult to our intelligence as well, to be fed this crock of nonsense.
Well, in the way that Black women just get sidelined, because when the whole Black Lives Matter thing was going on, there was also like a side movement of hashtag say her name. And that got like no traction.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But also it's kind of, I also understand how good people get there. I really do, because I do understand how a 50-year-old woman who just wants to do good and just wants to say the right thing and wants to be politically correct puts up a sign that says Black trans lives matter, because she wants to do the right thing, and she genuinely has been told that this is some kind of massive problem, and that there's just millions of people that are being murdered on the streets in Pennsylvania because of Black trans murder. So she puts up the sign. She does not know what it means. She's reciting the mantras, and it's all just kind of just made up. And of course, there's going to be guys that are in prostitution that are cross-dressers and are being hurt, and that's horrific. And not even the most, no radical feminist thinks that that's a good thing. We all think it's horrific because we understand that the sex industry in and of itself is violence against people. Okay, we understand it's violence against women, but of course, if a guy is caught up in that, it's violence against him as well. And so that narrative is actually incredibly confusing, and it's really messing us up from being able to untangle ourselves from the conversations.
Yeah, and then you see a lot of these trans activists, they talk about sex work as work a lot too.
Don't even get me
started. Prop up the
started.
porn industry and prostitution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, almost like it's virtuous. Like I saw a meme recently that had, different people as like, these are all valid jobs. And it's just like, any job. And then one of them, of course, was like somebody who's doing OnlyFans. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think the connection is between the trans movement and the whole sex work is work movement? Great.
That's a great point, because before I was called TERF, I was called SWERF. So that's the whole kind of, TERF did not exist without SWERF. And SWERF was a word that was created by a female who was not a prostitute. I think if I'm not mistaken, her name has escaped me, but I believe that she was somehow involved in some kind of madame pimping, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, it wasn't invented by a sex worker. And the whole concept of sex workers' work is completely illegitimate, because no abolitionist woman was ever going to say to you that they were involved in sex work. They're going to say, no, I was exploited by punters, by pimps, by johns, by tricks, whatever they're going to say. And it's obvious, no one thinks that that being abused is a job, but sex work is work, and being tied to trans women as women. These are very powerful messages, because it really speaks to our hearts, because we want to be compassionate and sympathetic, and we don't want to say the wrong thing to people. So there's given this kind of, okay, but we understand it's a lie, but lie because it's nice. So it's like, don't insult the women in prostitution by calling her a prostitute, call her a sex worker, because you don't want to offend her or hurt her. But that takes away from what's happening here. That takes away from the inherent violence that's involved in this transaction. And it also, with the same thing with the mantra of trans women or women, it doesn't help, because nobody really thinks that a trans woman is a woman. When you say the term trans woman, everybody knows that you mean a man. There's no such thing as a female trans woman. It's a male. So that whole narrative, that whole mantra is I actually think that it's part of a wider movement of just complete body dissociation. And I think that it's part of a very wider cultural issue of us being so dissociated from our sex bodies. And we already know there's a study that I published on my Facebook a few weeks ago about how teenagers and young women are having record levels of less sex. So people are having less sex. There's more a movement to a completely online interaction, which definitely OnlyFans and the pandemic has not helped things. And you have people who are in a full-time committed relationship with the person that they're subscribed to on OnlyFans, right? It's like that Joaquin Phoenix movie, Her, where he's in love with the machine. Mm-hmm. Right? He's in love with the machine that's talking to him. I'm not sure how it's really any difference. And I think that we're also going to see, last year was a record a year for the real doll sex industry.
Right.
So there were far more men purchasing these dolls. And it's nobody, when people say blow up doll, they kind of go, oh, haha, that's so funny. or because they imagine, I don't know, like a blow up doll, right? It does not look like that. These dolls, they feel real. They look like children with massive breasts. I mean, I've seen them, I've touched them. And it's a very deviant thing to do. It's not like masturbation. This is a very deep connection that somebody is building with this inanimate object. Actually, they're now, the dolls are now actually moving. It's all incredibly strange to see. And I think that the whole normalization of prostitution, body dissociation has led to the trans movement. You could not have the trans movement without having the sex workers' rights movement, right? And I say that term, I don't really mean that term, but you couldn't have them. They exist together.
Yeah, they really seem to. And when I see these sex dolls, especially the ones that move and like are kind of AI, it makes me just think like we're just being replaced as women. You know, it's like Stepford wives. And then women don't even want to be women anymore. We're men, or we're somewhere in between.
And then what does surrogacy do? Because if you take away that whole thing, okay, fine, you want to have a baby, well, you know, go to Colombia and have one, and rent the womb and bring it back, and you can have a baby. And we are not just, you know, we're not any of these things. We're not sex dolls. We're not just mothers. Women are a whole multitude of things. And some of us are many things, and some of us are, you know, some of us don't want to be mothers, and that's fine. But the normalization of dissociation from biology, from mothers are female and females can be mothers, and everybody came from a mother, right? So now you have this nonsense that's being taught that men can get pregnant, right? That if you ask a 15-year-old if a man can get pregnant, if you Google, can a man get pregnant? It says yes. Did you know that?
Wow.
If you Google, can a man get pregnant? And if anybody's listening, I really I advise you to do it, because it's so mind-blowing. It says, yes, some men get pregnant, and many do. It's just like it's beyond nuts.
Yeah. And the fertility industry, it profits off of this trans stuff, because they're sterilized people and they want to have children. So what are they going to do? They're going to invest in fertility treatments by freezing their eggs or freezing their sperm, or just using somebody else's DNA completely.
Right. But the thing is, I think that is just, it's another wish list, right? It's almost like saying, yeah, the penis will work. No, these people, the idea that if you freeze your eggs, you're giving yourself some kind of fertility option in the future for after you've taken testosterone, it's the same kind of, it really is a big fantasy, because, okay, of course, if you freeze embryos or you freeze eggs, you may be able to bring children to the world. But look at Blair White, perfect example. Blair White was utterly convinced that he would be able to produce sperm for a surrogate, right? And he was totally convinced, and he made all of these videos about it. And he'd only been on testosterone for a couple of years, and he said, I'm just not fertile. He stopped taking the estrogen, and he said, my baby dream is not going to happen because I'm infertile, right? So this idea that you can just, bank your sperm or freeze a couple of eggs and still have that option entirely preserved in the future, the same way as you and I have those kinds of options, is complete and utter nonsense. It's total garbage, because first of all, you need another person, or you need a surrogate. If you're a woman, you need sperm from somewhere. The whole thing, it's like, you can't just, and children, especially the ones that are 14, 15, 16, they're told you can preserve your fertility, right? But just go through this procedure, take some eggs, but no one's explained to them, right? But do you have a couple of $100,000? And have you thought about the fact that, this baby will be gestated by another? Have you thought about any of this? That Noah woman who the one who says she's a gay man in England, she spoke about these the graphic procedure of having to retrieve eggs, which were very, very big, to preserve her fertility because she was going to go on testosterone and have a hysterectomy. And surrogacy is completely illegal. Commercial surrogacy is illegal in the United Kingdom. So how was she going to complete this ludicrous fantasy of a bio baby,
right,
as well as complete the ludicrous fantasy of having a quote unquote functional cis penis? The whole thing is just garbage. And the whole idea about preserving fertility or trying to do something, it was always to overcome something horrific that had happened. Often the idea about banking sperm, for example, came because the man had to undergo like testicular cancer treatments. And they said, you might want to think about this for the future. And so that's like, that's a very different situation from a 14-year-old girl making a decision to be sterile and to give her this ludicrous fantasy of potential fatherhood, right? It just really, I don't know why we've confused teenagers so much about biological sex and how babies are made.
Yeah, and how many teenage girls have said, I never want to get pregnant,
Yeah. It's so hilarious as well, because it's this, very few women said, oh, I knew at 14, 15 that I wanted to have a child at 35. No one knows. You have no clue. And teenage girls as well, like, you're not making the best decisions. So the idea that, we want to try and stop teens from getting pregnant, right? Because they don't make great decisions. But the idea that they can, however, they're completely qualified to make the decision to never get pregnant, well, that's fine, because that's all caught up in an identity.
Yeah. So do you notice any differences between Israel and America as far as this gender?
In terms of gender? Well, okay. So I think that, not really. There's fewer people, right? So I'm actually originally from Scotland, from Glasgow. That's where I grew up, and that's where my family still lives. So I have a lot of connections to a lot of different places. So I still have my ear to the ground about things that are happening in Glasgow, because I have a lot of friends that I went to high school with that are telling me shocking stories. A lot of them are now mothers whose kids are caught up in this. So I hear a lot about what's happening. So I'd say that everywhere in the Western world is pretty much at the same level. Of course, America, in terms of the younger, the more radical surgeries, like the non-binary, are 18 months to 2 years further ahead than Israel, for example. I've yet to see underage non-binary surgeries in Israel, but they're coming. There's no way to prevent it. And interestingly, there was a documentary that was released in Israel called Trans Kids, which I watched reluctantly, that was about 3 females and 1 male who were transing. They were young. I don't know. They were like 16, 17, 18, young people. And one of them was being interviewed. I think it was one of the females. And she said that she was the first one in her friend group to trans, and that she had gotten the idea, or she said that she was in Florida visiting family or doing something on holiday, and she watched a Jazz Jennings on TV, and she said, that's what I am. So it's almost like you get these ideas from other places. Who knows if it came from, Canada also is quite advanced in terms of all of the things that it's doing. But it's this idea about, if California decides that non-binary surgeries are totally fine and insurance should pay for it, then other states will follow, then other countries will follow. And it's just going to keep on spreading, because no doctor in Switzerland is going to say, no, I'm not going to perform the non-binary top surgery, because he knows that his colleagues in San Francisco are doing it and he wants the money. And this rhino just is, the genie is out of the bottle, and we're going to have to do something very radical to try and really pull this back. And I actually don't want to pull it back. I actually want to abolish the gender industry. I don't think that we can regulate it. But I understand the work that others want to work to try to limit it a bit first. But I think the ideal goal for women should be to abolish the gender industry, especially the pediatric gender industry.
So what's your strategy? So your strategy right now, it seems, is just exposing it, like with the GenderMap and the YouTube videos with the only enemies.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that what I'm thinking, I mean, I really think now that despite the fact that the world is very connected, we have to localize our strategies. So, and you have to, I really want to connect with people who are willing to equate themselves with the local gender clinics and go there and scope them out and perhaps protest and connect with somebody else to protest. I mean, to start to get involved, because it has to be local. It has to be localized in order for this to work. We have to have, you have to connect locally with 5 or 6 other people that are willing to band together and do something about these clinics, even if it is just exposing them. But it has to be handled. It has to be handled, I think, on a localized level, because you need, in order to understand what is happening in your local gender clinic, you need to really be in the mindset, the language, the culture, the accents, the laws, the nuances, and then we all need to come together and talk about what is happening at our local gender clinics.
So do you recommend that people just go to their local gender clinics and just peruse and act like they're interested? And
well, I mean, everybody can go to gendermapper.org, also on YouTube, if they want to listen to some of these calls that have been made. I would really love it if more people were to connect to me, and you know, we could talk about strategizing. There's really the list of possibilities for us is endless. If somebody was to go to a gender clinic and go through intake and decide to just to see what it's like, just to go in and get some forms, tell them you'll think about it, have a consultation, you know, things like that. Of course, you need to consult and see whether or not, you know, it's legal. But most of these places are incredibly excited to tell you what they're up to, right? They're happy about it. They're not ashamed. They think it's absolutely wonderful that they're doing these surgeries, and they'll blab. Because they're, I don't know, they're just, maybe they're evil, maybe they want money, maybe they're insane, but I've not seen a gender surgeon that hasn't been very excited to tell people what they're up to.
Well, they've been emboldened by the culture and by the law. I mean, especially.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I don't really know how, I mean, people don't know what's going on around them, right? So these gender clinics are acting with impunity because they don't have the criticism from the wider. I do not believe if I was to go today and walk the streets of London and speak to 100 taxi drivers, that they would think that it's okay that children are having these surgeries. And if I was to go to 100, you know, women that are flight attendants and ask them, you know, if I was to go to London and speak to 100 flight attendants and say, do you think it's okay that this is happening? No. People, the people who go along with this, they're heavily indoctrinated into this culture of gender affirmation, and they're not your average citizen. And we have to engage the average citizens, and we need to figure out a way how we're going to break that, you know, open that first conversation with them.
And you have voluntary positions available at the GenderMapper?
Everything. If somebody wants to come and help with art, if somebody wants to actually start picking up the phones and making some calls, then that's great. If somebody has some kind of fantastic skills with data, yes. I mean, just come to the GenderMap, get in contact. If you feel that you're the kind of person that could walk into a Planned Parenthood and pick up some information, then contact me. Of course, I want to hear. And if you are, if you're in, I don't know, Tasmania, contact me. I want to hear from everyone. It really doesn't matter where you are. If you know or you suspect there's a gender clinic in your country, contact the GenderMapper.
Great. Yeah, that sounds really awesome. And it sounds like you also provide resources for parents who need help.
Yeah. So the resources that I offer to parents, I mean, I don't have anything on a personal level that I've created to offer to parents. Of course, if they come to the GenderMapper, then I can also refer them on to the nonprofits that I co-founded, Partners for Ethical Care, and they have a wealth of information about books, leaflets, handouts, endless information and resources for parents. And of course, invitation into closed groups where parents can talk without judgment, which I know is really important.
Yeah, that's great. So do you have anything else you want to share? Any projects you have going on or anything?
So I just would really like to say to everyone that going into 2022, I really would love to connect with lots more people and have a lot more people visit the GenderMapper and share the work as far as you can. So that's what I would like to kind of tell everybody that I'm excited to do. And also, I'm going to be returning, and I've got many articles that I'm writing, mainly about Planned Parenthood. Got a couple that are about pornography, a couple that are about gender clinics. I mean, I've just got so much information that I'm excited to bring to everybody in 2022.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, and everybody as well. And also, if you are the parent of a dysphoric child, please don't let them watch the new Sex and the City. It's really nuts. So if anybody has a dysphoric child, or if anybody's young sister is involved in this, just try to get them to first of all get off Tumblr, and do not watch this new Sex and the City garbage.
A good public disclaimer.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
It was great.
Thank you for listening to an exclusive WLRN interview. To contact Alix, go to thegendermapper.org and check out her YouTube channel at GenderMapper for more content, including the Only Enemies series. WLRN produces a monthly podcast that comes out the first Thursday of every month. Go to womensliberationradionews.com to listen to the podcast, read our articles, and to make a donation. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more interviews and other content. Stay strong, sisters.